next 15 minutes, we're going to take an in-depth look at the work of the Standards Forum. And first, here's what we're going to do. We're going to discuss the broad agenda of the Standards Forum. We'll get a brief overview, if you like, and then after that, we'll then focus and zero in on two of the hot topics, those being ISO 20022 and then market practice and innovation. So without further ado, let's get some discussion on the overview of the work of the Standards Forum. And joining me for that here in our Sibos TV studios are these three wonderful guests. First of all, we're joined by Dana Brants, Head of Standards Initiative at SWIFT. Nice to have you with us. Ted ROTHSCHILD is also with us. He's the Executive Director of the Global Market Infrastructure Team at JP Morgan. And then Andrew Douglas is with us as well. Last but certainly not least, Andrew, and he is the VP of Public Affairs in Europe at the DTCC. That's the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. So nice to have you all with us. And if I can start with you, Dana, first of all, as I mentioned before the break, your stand jam-packed last year. Apparently it was standing room only. So tell me what delegates can expect this time around.
Same as last year, but just taking it a step forward. I think we created a very inspiring environment this year for a lot of debates around the practical implementation of standards. We're trying to take a very pragmatic approach and have a lot of debate focusing on how to make it easier and how to really implement it rather than talking about theory. So we try to bring it a bit down to earth this year.
Okay, and Ted, for example, SWIFT has been making a lot of changes, a lot of noises, if you like, in the market infrastructure space. Tell us what those moves have been like, and where do you see those going forward?
Those moves have been very encouraging. It's something we've been encouraging SWIFT to be working on. It extends the value proposition in a very important direction out to the infrastructure itself, getting the infrastructure on the secure, reliable network, as well as the common standard, makes the entire process that much more efficient.
And what are the overall trends you've been seeing there?
You know, as expected, initially we saw a lot of smaller emerging marketplaces grabbing hold of SWIFT. Of late, it's really the big infrastructures, this gentleman from DTC is a key point, understanding the value of standards and the basic value proposition.
Well, let's bring Andrew in right now. What can you say about what Ted has just said about clients like yourself, making them understand the value of what SWIFT does?
I think it's important that infrastructures do get on board with the standards, because the infrastructures generally act as a point of aggregation. So by going through an infrastructure, you can actually reach a much, much broader audience than trying to pick off individual firms. So I think the application of ISO standards in the infrastructure world is key to the success of the ISO standards.
And how difficult has it been, certainly on the client side, to get your people in your banks, your institutions excited about this? Because, you know, resources are a little bit short, even though a lot of corporations are sitting on a lot of cash. Tell me about the way that works in-house.
Yeah. We actually, I was part of a working group within SWIFT that looked at the whole issue of communication and how you can get that out into the marketplace. And we came to the conclusion that historically the reason that we think that the dissemination of ISO 20022 in particular has maybe not been as successful as it could have been was down to the fact that we were perhaps giving the wrong message to the wrong people. So what we've tried to do is identify who the right people are, who we should be providing the message to, more business people than operations people, and what that message should be. So looking to tailor the message and focusing really on the benefits rather than the nuts and bolts of standards. Because business people, they don't want to know about the nuts and bolts. They want to know, what is this going to do for me?
I totally understand that point, because this has been one of my bedtime reading. I know this was, I need the Super Dummies book though, unfortunately. So just picking back up on that point, Dana, if you like, you know, if you're trying to reach business leaders, you're trying to get this really on their agenda. They're not the most sometimes techie of people. They just want it straight. How do you think you're going to change some of your strategies going forward?
I think last year we had the Dummies book, and as you said, we need to have a layer down as well. So this year we're going to launch a video on ISO 2022, which really explains it in what we call plain English and addresses in the language of business people. So we hope that will be a sort of tool that can help.
Plain English, that's always good.
And I think it's also important to make sure you get the right channels for those communications, to make sure that the channels are the ones that the people you're trying to communicate with actually listen to or read. So I think there's a fair bit of work that needs to be done to identify.
And
those
very
three.
briefly, 20 seconds left. Ted, I just want to quickly come back to you. We're going to focus in on some of the key topics that is the work of the Standards Forum. One of them is the LEI, the Legal Entity Identification. Just tell us briefly about where you see that going forward.
It's come out of nowhere. It's a success story because the regulators gave the standards community a very short time period to come up with a solution. And we have come up with what we think will be a very effective global solution for a fairly large regulatory hurdle that we'll all have to get over. Important to remember that LEI is the building block for the bigger reporting, but we've built a very solid building block in a very short time.
Now, promise me when you get the super dummies version that I get it as well, okay? Thanks very much to all of you, Dana, Ted, and Andrew, for joining us on Sibos TV today.